like Deja Kelly and others that want to get this thing done and want to play games. So for you to say everybody's on the same page was a complete lie. Now, here's Adam Silver. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said Tuesday night he is tracking WNBA collective bargaining sessions very closely, and that he and Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum would both be willing to join the prolonged negotiations to finalize a deal. That means when Mark Tatum is getting involved, the guy I put in the thumbnail is
Adam Silver has officially stepped into the WNBA's collective bargaining battle, and he's doing it with his cards face up. The NBA commissioner isn't acting as a neutral referee. He's taken a clear stance. His message is blunt. Compromise is required, and the games must go on. That position should sound familiar. It mirrors exactly what Caitlin Clark said just 2 weeks ago when she publicly broke from the Players Association. Now, the most powerful executive in professional basketball is openly validating her viewpoint, while the league's co-founders are left scrambling to protect an off-season project that suddenly looks very fragile.
Silver also said he has great relationships with many of the players and believes the sides are on course for a solution. The current 40-day extension ends January 9th, and that date is fastly approaching. Okay, he says, I remain optimistic we'll get something done, but whether that means I'm physically sitting at the table for the negotiation, Silver said. And again, I speak for Mark as well. We have been involved with this league for 3 decades. In essence, I care enormously about it and want it to be successful, and I want the players to feel fairly treated as well. And I realize there's been a disconnect, especially over the last few months in these negotiations.
Here's why Adam Silver's intervention actually matters. He didn't simply offer his help, he drew a clear line. Silver said both sides must reach a meeting of the minds, and that compromise is unavoidable. He also acknowledged that WNBA players deserve substantially higher pay because the league has grown. But pay close attention to what he didn't say. There was no endorsement of the 50-50 revenue split the Players Association is demanding. Instead, Silver framed the discussion around higher absolute dollars, not revenue percentages. That distinction is critical. It's a direct dismissal of the union's core negotiating framework. The timing makes this even more consequential. Silver made these remarks on December 17th at the NBA Cup Finals in Las Vegas. The current CBA extension expires on January 9th. That leaves just 3 weeks to bridge a gap insiders describe as wide. Players are pushing for 30% of league revenue. The WNBA is offering 15%. And now Silver has publicly urged both sides to meet in the middle, while clearly rejecting the players' preferred method of calculating their share.
And how we feel. And now let's get to the actual video so we can get more dialogue of what Breanna Stewart had to say. They trying to hardball. The owners aren't going to give in to all this nonsense. They're trying to hardball, these players are. And at the end of the day, Adam Silver is with Caitlin Clark. Y'all need to compromise and get this damn deal done and stop playing games.
Hey, Stewie. Good to see you. I had 2 questions. The first, Adam Silver spoke ahead of the Cup and said that if necessary, he'd be up for coming to the bargaining table, him and Mark Tatum. I'm just wondering, do you think that would be beneficial? Would there be value to having Adam's presence at the bargaining table?
Watch Breanna Stewart's response closely, because it reveals more than it says. When she admits that what they're doing right now isn't getting them anywhere, the meaning is clear. The Players Association's hardline strategy has stalled out. They opted out of the CBA back in October, assuming the league would buckle on revenue sharing. Instead, they've burned through 2 extensions, watched the WNBA roll out expansion plans without their input, and now find themselves staring at the possibility of the NBA commissioner sitting directly across the bargaining table. Stewart says she'd welcome Adam Silver's involvement, but pay attention to how she frames it. Her focus isn't leverage or demands. It's making sure everyone understands what the players want and how they feel. That's not the language of a side negotiating from strength. It's the language of a group hoping Silver applies pressure to ownership. The problem is, Silver has already made his position clear. He isn't coming to impose a 50-50 revenue split. He's coming to force a compromise that ensures the games get played.
What we're doing right now isn't really getting us anywhere, so if that means that Adam and Mark need to come to the table, we're more than happy to have that, and just making sure everybody understands what we want and how we feel, and realizing that both things can be true together. You know, everybody can agree and like get what they want out of this, but there has to be some, like, I don't know, mutual, some things in common happening first. So yeah, if Adam wants to come, I would love to have him.
Here's where the situation becomes truly uncomfortable for the players. Stewart says both things can be true at once, that everyone can get what they want, but then adds that something mutual has to happen first. That single word changes everything. For the past 2 months, the Players Association treated revenue sharing as a non-negotiable demand. They publicly mocked Adam Silver's October comments about absolute dollars versus percentages. They framed this entire dispute as a moral battle over equity and fairness. Now, their most visible leader is openly conceding that compromise means both sides giving something up. That's not a clarification, it's a retreat. And it creates a serious credibility problem, especially for star players like Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, who are insulated from the financial pressure most players feel. The longer these negotiations drag on, the harder it becomes to ignore the reality. This fight isn't affecting everyone equally, and it's starting to look less like a unified stand and more like a split reality inside the locker room.
And the season is going to run from fall to April, which is in direct competition with Unrivaled. What were your immediate thoughts when you heard about Project B? And what's the long-term answer for the landscape of women's basketball? Is it to have one premier league? Is it to continue developing all of these leagues? Like, what is truly the answer? What is the ideal world for the women's basketball landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think my immediate thoughts when I saw Project B, I was kind of like, well, they saw what worked. You know, they saw the success that we had here at Unrivaled, and they wanted to be a part of that in their own way and try to do it. But at the same time, knowing, what we're doing here is...
This is the moment where the real fracture becomes impossible to ignore. Stewart is asked about Project B, the new 3-on-3 league set to run from fall through April. That timeline puts it in direct competition with Unrivaled's winter window. Listen carefully to her response. She says Project B saw what worked at Unrivaled and wanted to be part of it in their own way. Then she quickly pivots to praising Unrivaled, its equity structure, its resources, and the appeal of keeping players in one city. What's striking is what she leaves out. She never acknowledges that Project B's schedule actually fits more cleanly with the WNBA calendar. She doesn't mention that players who prefer to remain overseas and still return in time for a full WNBA season now have a viable alternative. Instead, she dismisses Project B as imitation and redirects the conversation back to Unrivaled's advantages. That isn't analysis, it's branding. And it lays bare the conflict of interest that has quietly shaped these negotiations from the very beginning.
Making sure the resources, people are staying in one city. Yeah, we'll have like a tour stop in Philly this year, but making sure that we're prioritizing players and their bodies and their health. And as for a long-term solution, I don't know the answer, because it's like now you have all these options. You have Unrivaled, you have WNBA potentially happening in its normal season.
Listen carefully to this part again. Stewart says that if the WNBA season isn't cohesive with everything else, then nothing can fully work together, so there has to be a version of reality where everyone agrees. But in the very next breath, she admits they aren't there yet, and that her current focus is Unrivaled. That single admission exposes the entire problem in one answer. The Players Association is supposed to be negotiating on behalf of all WNBA players. Yet the players leading those talks are simultaneously running a competing league that benefits from a shorter WNBA season and depends on keeping the winter months untouched. Caitlin Clark called this out 3 weeks ago when she said compromise was necessary because the games have to be played. The implication was unmistakable. Some players are prioritizing their off-season business ventures over the league that actually employs them. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert insisted that all players were aligned. That wasn't true. Players like Deja Kelly and others publicly backed Clark's stance. And now Adam Silver is stepping in, not by coincidence, but because negotiations have stalled for exactly this reason. The conflict of interest isn't hypothetical anymore. It's the roadblock.
Office, Silver said ahead of NBA Cup final in Las Vegas. I talk to the people who are at the negotiating table on a daily basis, and I've said before, we, the NBA, WNBA Collective acknowledged that our players deserve to be paid significantly more than they have so far based on the increased success of the league, and it's just a question now of finding a meeting of the minds in terms of what is a fair deal.
Here's what comes next and why it matters. Adam Silver said both he and Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum are prepared to step directly into the negotiations. That detail shouldn't be overlooked. When Mark Tatum gets involved, it signals that the NBA views this as a full-scale business risk, not a routine labor dispute. Tatum oversees league operations and international strategy. He doesn't appear for everyday bargaining sessions. He shows up when deals are threatened and investments need protecting, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The WNBA is in the middle of its most aggressive growth phase ever. Golden State joins next season, with Toronto and Portland set to follow in 2026. The league has also locked in new media agreements worth $2.2 billion over 11 years, beginning in 2025. A work stoppage, or a prolonged fracture between the league and its players, would put all of that momentum at risk. At this stage, disruption isn't just inconvenient. It's unacceptable, but there's another line the league cannot cross. It can't establish a precedent where the players effectively run the operation, especially not through a 50-50 revenue split in a league that is still losing money. That's why Silver isn't stepping in to brainstorm or mediate. He's coming to impose a solution. Not to negotiate endlessly, not to explore theoretical options, but to enforce a compromise both sides can accept and move past. That compromise will almost certainly include meaningful salary increases. It's likely to feature improved travel standards and expanded player benefits. It may even introduce a form of revenue sharing, but one tied to profitability benchmarks, not gross revenue. What it will not include is the Players Association's demand for a flat 30% of league revenue regardless of the league's financial reality, and that's exactly why this matters for Caitlin Clark. She broke ranks with the union because she recognized this truth early. The WNBA's growth is real, but it's also fragile. The league has to capitalize on this moment with as many games and as much exposure as possible. Anything that threatens the season or generates damaging headlines directly undercuts that momentum. Caitlin Clark understands this because she's the engine behind the growth. Her games averaged 1.2 million viewers this season. Without her, the league average dropped to roughly 400,000. Calling her stance selfish misses the point. Her call for compromise isn't about leverage for herself. It's about recognizing where the real leverage actually exists. Adam Silver sees the same reality. That's why his comments focused on increased success and higher absolute dollar payouts. He's acknowledging that players deserve more money because the league is growing, but he's also making it clear that growth is measured in real dollars, not abstract percentages. The WNBA generated roughly $200 million in revenue this season. A 30% share would amount to $60 million split among 144 players, about $417,000 each on average. Sounds impressive on paper, but the league still has operating costs, team expenses, expansion fees, and facility investments. At 30%, the numbers simply don't add up. Even 15% is a stretch under the current financial structure. Adam Silver understands this because the NBA went through the same trajectory. The NBA didn't reach 50-50 revenue sharing until the league was highly profitable and financially stable over decades. The WNBA is only 28 years old and just beginning to turn the corner on viability. Demanding NBA-level splits now is like asking for a penthouse right after leaving your parents' basement. Yet the Players Association trapped itself by framing this fight as one over equity and fairness rather than financial reality. They pitched it as a gender issue instead of a business issue, and that misstep has shaped the entire negotiation. Now, there's no turning back without looking like they've compromised their integrity. That's why Kathy Angelberg claimed all players were aligned. She had to preserve the image of unity, because once that facade cracks, the entire negotiation strategy collapses. But the facade is already broken. Caitlin Clark exposed the first crack, and players genuinely committed to the game widened it further. Now Adam Silver is poised to break it completely, forcing both sides to confront reality. The truth is simple. WNBA players deserve higher pay. The truth is also that the league can't sustain salaries based purely on revenue shares that overlook profitability. Real compromise means acknowledging both realities at once. Over the next 3 weeks, watch closely. The Players Association will either agree to a deal with significant raises, but no revenue sharing, or they'll see Adam Silver and Mark Tatum step in with a framework neither side loves, but one they can survive. Because this is what real compromise looks like. Not everyone gets exactly what they want, but everyone gets something they can accept, allowing the league to move forward. Breanna Stewart has made it clear her focus is unmatched, and that explains why these talks often stall. The players who should be most invested in growing the WNBA are instead distracted by side ventures. Meanwhile, players genuinely committed to the league's growth, like Caitlin Clark, are calling for compromise. And the commissioner is backing Clark while preparing to enforce a resolution. This isn't about right or wrong, it's about understanding the moment. For the first time in its history, the WNBA has real momentum. That momentum is fueled by one player bringing casual fans to a league they've ignored for decades. Those fans don't care about CBA deals or revenue formulas, they care about watching Caitlin Clark play. And if these negotiations lead to a shortened season, delayed start, or any disruption to that experience, those casual fans will vanish just as quickly as they showed up.